pleased to have with me today Avinash. Welcome, Avinash.
Thank you.
Hey, Avinash. So you're a CISO. I've looked at your track record. It's a very impressive track record. And I think the person that knows you best is yourself. So would you mind sharing a few words about yourself?
Sure, thanks, Matias, and thanks everyone. My name is Avinash, and I'm working as a CISO with Persistent for last about 10 plus years. Into the industry for now roughly about 29 years. Very much passionate about security, and I have gone through almost all the domains when it comes to the IT infrastructure or the ITES companies, may it be managed service, may it be designing of network, and uh, of course, security has been my passion, and I love doing more and more research about security. There are a few white papers I have published in terms of the security in the recent one. So that's the brief introduction about me.
Fantastic. Yeah, very diverse background, and you've indeed touched on a lot of different subjects. So for today, what I would like to start with is how can you actually make sure that everybody rallies around security? How can we make sure within an organization like yours, where security is very important, that you get everybody on board with security?
Yeah, that's a very good question, as well as the actual practical problem as well. Uh, if you look at the IT industry, maybe about 3 or 4 years back, you will see that the security was always at the back seat, okay, and it was more focused towards the infrastructure or the business delivery. However, in the recent past, security has taken the front seat, okay, and it took a lot of time for all the people to get convinced that security is something very, very important. If you look at the 5 years back, IT spend, the major IT spend that was happening and the board that was approving maybe 5%, but today you will see that the board has acknowledged that security is equally important like the other activities, and that is where the security has taken the board seat at the board. How this has happened is like it is very important that security becomes the culture, okay, and that is where it takes a lot of time. There are a lot of programs that we need to run. It doesn't happen in day one. If I had to give my example in my organization, what we did is we carry out this continuous enforcements about why to build that security culture. And now I can say proudly that after, let's say, spending last 4 years continuously about creating that awareness, so today we have got a very well defined culture in the organization. That culture also goes and percolated at the board level. I do have a representation in the board wherein I do present that, okay, what kind of cybersecurity things are happening, what is Persistent is doing is all about that. How do we are secure into that? So essentially, we need to run those programs to create that awareness, and that is where those champions get created, and then those kind of visibility comes in. That is one way of looking at it. And in the industry, you will also see that because of certain incident, something got triggered, and that is where security has taken the more weightage, and then people start looking at it. That is another way, or the many companies might have gone for that. So that's my few words about how do we build that culture in the organization to take that seat for the security.
Absolutely fantastic, and great to hear that you actually have a seat at the board to make sure that security is important and that the right amount of budget is essentially allocated. Because ultimately, it costs money, and as long as nothing happens, you should be happy. Because if security, if nothing comes up, that is great. But it's very hard to explain the value of security if nothing happens. But that is exactly our goal here.
Yes, and just to add that, Matthias, it is like something very similar to insurance. So nowadays, security is something very similar to insurance. That, okay, you must invest into that technology. You never know what will happen. It's like similar to that insurance. We do not think at why do I need to buy insurance. It's like something that we want to protect. That's the way.
Yeah, absolutely right. And so, as far as I understood, you also have a lot of developers in your organization. So you've talked about the top, the board. The board is worried about security, but it has to trickle down in the entire organization, and also the developers have to be on board with security. Can you shed some light on how you get the developers engaged, or what you're doing for developers, or how you essentially make sure that they want to write secure code and they are also, have tools and training or whatever you guys have internally to make sure they produce secure code?
Sure. Again, Persistent as a company, we work with multiple customers across the globe, and of course, the delivery environment is very complex. Sometimes it is with customers, sometimes it is a hybrid environment. So essentially, this developer end up in having access to production environment as well as to the non-production environment. They handle various critical data, and ultimately, whatever application that they develop is going to be the phase wherein that security value plays a very important role. So what we do is there are standard security guidelines which are provided for the SDLC. That is the one part that is mandatory. So any developer who joins or gets onboarded, they mandatorily needs to undergo that security SDLC orientation program. That is the first. Then second is about that project specific environment, do's and don'ts. That is the second one. And third is, of course, we do have some tools which will help us to do the security scanning for in terms of, for example, let's say you are developing a code and you are using, the developer tends to use some kind of code from the GitHub, maybe a GPL licenses. So are you doing any kind of violation over there? So these are the few mechanisms or the tactics that we follow to ensure that the whatever that code is getting delivered is foolproof, security proof. Of course, there is a process wherein it will also go through the code testing, code reviews, and finally the security testing before it goes for the UAT. That's the way. But essentially, to answer your question in one line, more emphasis is given about creating that awareness